And welcome back to the LA Football Show here on the LA Football Network. It is the LA Football Show live on a Tuesday. Typically, we'll be on Mondays, 7 o'clock USC Trojan Huddle edition, but this week we're on Tuesday. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Our guy, Dallas, made sure to let us know he's here. Came over from the Chargers chat for our Chargers edition last 30 minutes, and now he's over in the Trojans. Thank you, Dallas. Appreciate you, as always, my brother, for hanging out with us and watching all of our stuff and commenting and leaving your thoughts. We certainly appreciate it, but excited for the next 30 minutes to be talking Trojans. Jamal, alumni, former Trojan. What's up, brother? How we doing?
Doing well, right? Excited to talk about the Trojans of USC.
Yes, absolutely. Show is always brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head to BetOnline.ag today. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. You get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. You can bet on any sport out there, plus many other things, and they have the best lines in the business. That's BetOnline.ag. Promo code BELIEVE. Tell them the guys at the LA Football Network sent you. So, for the next 30 minutes, it's all Trojans here on the LA Football Show. And, spring practices are in full swing. We got the spring game, Jamal, in just a little over a week away, April 15th at the Collie at noon. Cannot wait. Should be a great time seeing Caleb and co in action. I'm curious what kind of contact there will be there, if they'll be tackling. Obviously, you don't want anyone to get injured by any means this early on. But hey, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people want to see this defense actually wrap some guys up and do some tackling. But anyway, we got plenty of time to get into that. But we thought today it'd be fun to kind of go through the schedule a little bit. I know we talked about the schedule when it first officially came out, but to really kind of look at who truly, and you can derail this or move this along however you want, Jamal, but who truly is the biggest challenger for USC this year? Do you want to do biggest challenger of the Pac-12, or just like what games scare you the most on the
Yeah,
schedule?
I think the games that kind of scare me the most, Ryan. I mean, the one point I'll make earlier about the spring game, April 15th. Obviously, very excited. We both are. We're gonna have great representation with LAFB there. And you're asking the question about whether you're going to see tackling. Well, there's no tackling in the regular season for the Trojans, so why should there be in the spring game? So, my answer to that question would be a resounding no. So, but nevertheless, I
Fair.
think moving forward, Ryan, when I look at this schedule, I think there's two games that really jump out to me as games where they are credible threats: at Notre Dame, at Oregon. And when you look at Notre Dame, everyone forgets with just all of the hoopla around college football. I think this went under the radar, but the fact that Hartman from Wake Forest went to Notre Dame as one of the most decorated quarterbacks last year, led the ACC in passing, really put Wake Forest in contention for a conference championship without much around him. To have him with the Fighting Irish now in South Bend, to me, that one is sort of red lights flashing there. And then the other big one for me is at Oregon. And just given with Nick's coming back, everything that they have in terms of offensive and defensive line, how well they play at home, those are the two for me that really jump out as games to watch. Obviously, there's some fun ones at home, hosting Washington, obviously hosting UCLA in the Victory Bell game, but there's a lot of confidence that comes from playing in the Coliseum and having Caleb Williams. I think going on the road, hostile environment against two teams that can go kind of point for point with SC, those are the two things. Those are the two ingredients that, concern me about a potential upset.
What worries me about the Notre Dame game, Jamal, and it shouldn't worry me because, I mean, these guys are playing this game for a reason and they prepare. They should, which I think under Lincoln Riley they will, but should prepare the same every single week, regardless of the time of year, regardless of the opponent. But I think this, when you look at, and it does do this more often when they play at Notre Dame, but a lot of times, these rivalry games, these big rivalry games happen like towards the end of the year, and seeing that Notre Dame game really kind of almost smack dab in the middle of the schedule there on October 14th. And it makes it exciting that they get to end the season with UCLA. I think that's super fun, which we can get to here in a little bit. But, just last year, they ended the season basically, essentially against Notre Dame at the Coliseum, and now having to play it so much earlier. I don't think that should have an effect, but do you think that's something that kind of goes into preparation and these guys' thought process? I mean, obviously these kids are still in school and doing different things, and so is that something different? We're like, oh wow, I got to prepare for this really monumental rivalry game here in the middle of the semester, as opposed to right before finals week or whatever later in the year.
I don't think so. I think that, historically, SC's always played Notre Dame at Notre Dame, kind of middle of October. And then when the game's in the Coliseum, it's always the week after UCLA. So I think there's kind of an expectation there. I think the one thing when I look at this schedule that would concern me a little bit more is, are you prepared to play Notre Dame? When you look at that schedule, I mean, San Jose State, Nevada, Stanford, ASU, Colorado, Arizona, the first 6. I mean,
Yep.
I think lightning would have to strike, for USC not to be 6-0 going into that Notre Dame game. I mean, when you look at, first 2 are cream puffs, look at the state of Stanford. That's kind of a glorified, 1AA team right now. Arizona State on sanctions. I think the Dion game is going to be really fun, but I just don't think he has the horses yet to make that a competitive game. I think it'll be competitive in the pregame press conferences, but that'll be more exciting than the actual game. I think home for Arizona could be interesting with Delora, but, that's going to be kind of a Dorian Singer coming out party, I think, and hard to see Arizona kind of travel into the Collie and really put up a big game. So I worry a little bit about the disposition of the team. I think they're going to be 6-0, but they're going to be kind of cruising to 6-0. And then when you have that big jump and then that first jump on the road, that worries me more than anything else. And I love Dallas's point there about losing the OC to Bama. So obviously puts ND behind the curve. But, Dallas, if you recall, I don't think Notre Dame really was very dynamic offensively last year to begin with. If you recall, some of their early season struggles. So I think the OC change is going to help them. And then when you get such an experienced quarterback in Hartman, I mean, that's a very formidable game. And then when you have to sort of follow it up at home with a physical Utah team, that's a very interesting back-to-back. After you've had 6 really easy weeks, now you have arguably the toughest game on your schedule and then maybe the most physical game on your schedule back-to-back. That's where if they're going to lose, they may lose in those 2, sort of that interval, maybe 1 L there.
Well, it's tough. You go Notre Dame, Utah back to back. You get a quote unquote cupcake with Cal. Then you finish the year Washington, Oregon, UCLA. I mean,
Yeah.
those 5 of those final 6 games.
Yeah.
I mean, last year's SC schedule, I would say, was a pretty easy one.
Well,
I don't think anyone would argue that.
Significantly easier than this. What's interesting is I think SC on paper is a better team than they were last year. They've sort of retooled offensively, excited about the Cobbs, the Jamil Muhammad's coming in there on the defensive side, but their schedule is significantly tougher. And so the question is, they're better, but are they better than the delta in their schedule? And I think it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, because you look at last year, Jamal, I don't want to say they surprised people because everyone knew with Lincoln and Caleb, like there was a lot of hype in the media. They were AP, I think 15 going into the year after just a 4-win season, but they still they hadn't done anything on the field yet. So to an extent, they did surprise people in the sense of how good of a regular season they had, how prolific they were on offense, how obviously great Caleb was winning the Heisman. But now going into this year, that there's no surprising to go on. Like they are the team to beat in the Pac-12, and that's no disrespect for Utah, who won the Pac-12 title now 2 years in a row. But SC is SC, and everyone wants to beat SC no matter how good or bad they are. They always are going to have a target on their back because if that's what the institution is, that's being LA, that's being SoCal, that's being the men of Troy. And so they have all of that plus an actual much more difficult schedule and the fact that it's almost simulated in a short period of time because those I wouldn't even say first 6 games because I think that Arizona game scares me a lot as well. Those first 5 games I think are much easier. And then those last 7 outside of Cal are really, really challenging and can really throw some hicks with the team. But what I will say, and I think, Jamal, we kind of talked about this a little bit on a different show, is if they make it through this and they beat Notre Dame, they beat Utah, let's say they make it with one loss only, and that one loss is either to Notre Dame, Utah, Washington, Oregon, or UCLA. So 5 good teams. I don't think there should be any doubt that a one-loss USC team, if they win the Pac-12 title, will be in the college football playoff, because there should be no question about their strength of schedule. Whereas last year, that question kind of came up of, oh yeah, if they win the Pac-12 title, they'll get in by default because they won the title and they were ranked 4th going into it. But do they deserve it? Did they play enough quality opponents? This, that, and that. We had to say a lot like, well, the last 3 games, they did this, this, and this, but there was a lot in the beginning to be desired. Whereas now with this schedule, if they get through it, Jamal, there's no doubt in my mind, not only will they get in the playoff, will they be deserved of the playoff, but they'll actually be well prepared, which is probably the more important thing, because the last thing we want is this team to go to the playoff and get blown out by, say, an SEC team, where is if they're able to get through this, I think they'll be well prepared and they can play with anybody.
I completely agree with you, Ryan. I think, it's a tale of 2 seasons here. I mean, how fun is that 35-day period going to be? I mean, from October 14th to November 18th, I mean, you're talking about 5 out of 6 really marquee games. And so the season is going to be defined there. And it's going to be won or lost there. And so I completely agree with you. If they can get through this gauntlet with 1 loss, they're in the playoff. Let's see. That's going to be a tall order. When I look at this, I see 2 losses. When I look at this schedule, it's hard for me to look at this and say they're going to get through all of this. And I think it's going to be at Notre Dame, at Oregon, I think is where they're going to get tripped up. And I think that's, I think the Washington game is going to be dynamite, but the crowd and the pressure, and there's going to be kind of a 4th quarter interception there with Penix. And, I think they're going to be able to pull away. UCLA, obviously it's the rivalry game, but they're going to be having a first-time starter at quarterback, in the Collie. That's a tall order. But Utah, I think, struggles in the Coliseum outside of 2 years ago when everybody and their mother beat USC in the Coliseum. But traditionally, that's a bit of a struggle. Notre Dame, Oregon, I think is going to be tough. I think this is a 10-2 regular season.
Do you think 10-2 gets into the Pac-12 title at this point in April 4th?
Yes, it will, because one of those 2 losses is non-conference. So they'll be 8-1. They'll be 8-1, and that'll get them in. Yep.
True. And then if they can win it there, I think they still have a shot. But it's interesting. Real quick, just this, I see this all the time. Warren, thanks for the comment. We cover all 4 teams. This is supposed to be a generic background, just generic colors here. But I understand how it can be construed with Bruins colors. So maybe we do, Jamal, need another background just for the Trojans segment.
Absolutely. So, we need another one. I mean, it's ironic. I mean, I think Warren, you bring up a phenomenal point.
It's not purposeful.
It's not purposeful. When you think about it, all of the other LA teams are some variant of blue and gold. The Trojans are the outlier with the red there. So point noted. In the spirit of iterative feedback, the one thing I learned at Stanford was feedback is a gift. So Warren, thank you for the gift.
Yes. So we will work on getting a Trojan specific background just for this show. I've seen it's funny too. I've seen that comment a lot on our shows and videos.
Yeah.
And I get it, because at first glance, but the goal was we were trying to just be generic for all 4 teams to use it. But it does, look a little different, a little sore on the eyes for Trojans fans. So
we need like an animation of Traveler, sort of running across the screen there, to sort of alleviate.
Yeah. Well, hopefully to live and die in LA, we can have some, we can have like our new walkout anthem that we're going to get Carol Folt to get us happening, or Mike Baum. So, Mike Bone, excuse me. But yeah, 2 losses.
Let me ask you this. I'm going to ask you a question here.
Please do.
What is it going to take for Caleb Williams to go down as the greatest quarterback in USC football history? What does he have to do this year with this schedule and beyond? Because, in my mind, I think of Leinart, 37-2, 3 years, 34-game win streak, 2 national championships, a Heisman. He finished 3rd in the Heisman, and, the following year, obviously the Texas Epic, they win that game. It's 3 consecutive national titles. Is Obviously, I think we think Caleb Williams is going to be a much greater pro than Matt Leinart. I think that goes without saying. But just purely as a USC quarterback, is it even possible for Caleb to catch Mr. Leinart, or is it what does he need to do?
It's a fun question. I'll put it simply, and then we can debate back and forth. If he wins the Natty, this year,
which is what our man Dallas is saying, it's got to be
if he wins the Natty, it's done. He is the greatest Trojan quarterback of all time. Like in my eyes, obviously it will still be up for debate. In my eyes, it won't even be a question. I watched both play. I know people hate hearing the eye tests, but you can see with your eyes who does more with not with less necessarily, but who performs at different levels. And Matt Leinart will always be one of the greatest Trojan quarterbacks of all time. But what Caleb did in just this 1 year, the magic that he brings out is on a different level. So if he wins the Natty, it's over. If he wins the Heisman, but no Natty, I think it's still a debate. I think you can say he goes down 2 Heismans. I mean, that's almost what 2 players have done that in college football history.
Only one.
Only one. Griffin. Thank you. Only one. So he'd be one of 2 to ever do that. So that would put him right there. But no Natty. If he doesn't win either, then I still think he'll go down as one of the greatest, but I don't think you can have him in the conversation as the greatest. So it's got to be one of those 2, and the Natty puts him over the top for sure.
If he doesn't win either, and then not to play the doomsday scenario, is he greater than Carson Palmer?
Oh, well, how much stock do we put on drafted then? If he goes 1 overall, then you have kind of similar scenarios, right?
Yep. But, Carson was Heisman. Carson won the Orange Bowl. Carson kind of was in a rebuilding mode and then finally had Norm Chow. And if you look at Carson's supporting cast, I mean, he had the likes of Kareem Kelly and, Kerry Colbert and a very young, Mike Williams. And so the running backs were Justin Fargas, Sultan McCullough. I mean, not the superstars. Obviously, Mike Will was phenomenal by the end of his freshman year and then his sophomore year. But you take Mike Will out of that equation, not exactly murderer's row in terms of the skill position. Obviously, they had Polamalu on defense. But, you could argue Carson has done more with less. Caleb, for all of the dramatics, obviously the Tahj Spears game, Caleb is yet to win a big bowl game. So, I mean, if he goes empty on Natty, goes empty on Heisman, but wins a big bowl game, is it? How do you think about that? I think it's a fair to say Leinart stays 1, but does Carson stay 2 there?
Oh, so we're assuming he wins at least the bowl game, a bowl game this year.
He'll win the bowl game.
A New Year's 6.
He wins the Pac-12. He wins the bowl game. 12-2, whatever you want to call it there, but no Natty and no Heisman.
Yeah. So 1 Heisman, 1 bowl game, and probably number 1 overall pick. So they'd be very similar in terms of resume. Oh man, it'd be close. I mean, it'd be you then have to look at overall statistics or whatever. If it plays out like that, where he has a similar season to like he has this year, statistically, just doesn't win the Heisman, but wins a bowl game, I would probably give him the nudge as just and similar too, right? Both quarterbacks kind of brought the program back to prominence. So they have very similar kind of archetypes in terms of what they did, not only for their own careers, but also what they did for the program and for the university. So I'd probably lean Caleb, but it'd be tough. Maybe that's just recency bias because, Carson was great. Carson was considered one of the greatest prospects to come out, in recent memory when he was drafted 1 overall. And I don't know. What do you think?
It's a great point, Ryan. I would keep him at 3 because I would have Carson above him for a couple of reasons. I think that if you look at then the body of work, yes, he would probably have some more touchdown passes and whatnot. Obviously, the key hardware is the same, but I think Carson did more with less, and Carson would have only had Pete for 1 year over his entire career, whereas Caleb at least had Lincoln Riley for 2 years. And so for me, when you look at coach, when you look at supporting cast, you look at all of those things, yes, it was revived, but I think Caleb had more talent around him for a longer period of time. So I think Carson really is what started this dynasty and era. So if I would go Carson there. So it's kind of fascinating to me, Ryan. I mean, he can finish as high as 1. He could be as low as 3, depending on how this season plays out. So certainly a lot at stake there in terms of Trojan history.
Absolutely. So, okay, let me ask you this. We can wrap up with this on this live edition of Trojans Huddle. Leading into the spring game, putting you on the spot, as I always love to do.
Of course.
Outside of Caleb Williams,
yeah,
who is the most important player on this Trojans team, offense or defense? Just someone not named Caleb that is, you would say at this point, April 4th, needs to, not will have, but needs to, for this team to be successful, have the biggest impact in 2023.
Jamil Muhammad. I think Jamil Muhammad, to me, is going to be one of, if not the most important player on the Trojans, period. I mean, I think we sort of know what Caleb is and who Caleb is. And, you know, this team still lost 3 games last year, despite Caleb winning the Heisman, right? I mean, obviously there's injuries played a role and whatnot, but you can only go so far with Caleb without having any semblance of defense. I think Cobb is a traditional Big 12 linebacker. He's a guy who's going to gobble up a lot of tackles. He's got a nose for the football. But I think that true next level athleticism, it really is Jamil Muhammad. Who's the guy that's going to prevent another Dalton Kincaid game from happening? Who's the guy who's going to prevent, to a certain extent, another Michael Ezike game from happening? Who's the guy that's going to prevent a team like Tulane to be able to march down the field with less than a minute to go? And again, oh, by the way, the tight end caught the game-winning touchdown. So to me, there's just a very clear and gaping hole there at the linebacker position from an athletic perspective. And so to me, all eyes for me are on Jamil Muhammad.
Yeah, we say this all the time, but we don't. I mean, we do prep, but we don't like prep together. We say, hey, here's some things to take notes on. We'll talk. We don't script. But mine would have been Jamil Muhammad as well. I think he's the most underrated player that transferred in that is not getting talked about enough because he's going to have such an important role. He's going to open things up for a guy like Eric Gentry to do more in the pass rush that he wasn't able to do and use that lanky body in different ways. And I think they'll play really hand in hand well. But if I want to say someone else, and you can't go offense because as great as some of these receivers are, as great as these running backs are that transferred in and whatnot, we've seen what Caleb's done with when guys get injured. Like he still makes that offense go. So it's got to be a defensive player that's going to put this team over the top. So I'll go Calen Bullock, who last year was probably, maybe not even probably, but the best defensive player on this team. However, even with how great he was as a true sophomore, has some big time interceptions, big time plays. There were moments when had some missed tackles or just couldn't bring guys down, or missed assignments on the back end for big plays. And so he's a guy that is probably going into this year going to be considered the top safety in the Pac-12. I believe he's already been named on one of the watch lists, maybe even arguably one of the top safeties in all of college football. And so if he can play to that level and constitute this defense to be even remotely better than it was last year, then this is a team that can absolutely only lose 2 games or less, which would get them to the Pac-12 title and springboard them potentially to the college football playoffs. So either Jamil Muhammad, either Calen Bullock, you know, you're looking at 2 guys that if they can both ball out, this team is going to be a very good team in 2023.
Completely agree, Ryan. And I think my sleeper, and I think they're both going to be very critical because I think the team that I see the Trojans potentially playing in the Pac-12 title game, it's not going to be a rematch. I think it's going to be Oregon State. And I think against Oregon State, there's going to be a real necessity to have the likes of Jamil Muhammad and the likes of Calen Bullock play sound situational and schematic football because of the way Oregon State plays. So, I mean, throw that one in there as well, Ryan, as another gauntlet of a game. So when you talk about preparation for a potential college football playoff run, I think it's going to be, it's definitely there. And I think if they can go through that entire schedule with only 1 loss, I think you're looking at a team that is not going to be 4th in terms of seeding. They're going to be seeded 3 or higher. with an opportunity to really do some things in that Final Four if they're fortunate enough to get there.
Yeah, if the country and the voters can unveil some bias, and I think absolutely, and yeah, Oregon State, we'll talk about it a lot through the rest of this offseason. That's a team we're both very high on.
Yeah.
Jonathan Smith does such a great job up there, and they're a scary team, and it's a good thing we don't face them in the regular season. But I love that take, Jamal, of facing them in the Pac-12 title. Would be a lot of fun. But that is all the time we got for your LA Football Show live edition of the Trojans Huddle. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back on a Monday next week, 7 o'clock every Monday, LAFB Live, Trojans Edition. We'll be back later in the week for our regular pre-recorded show. So make sure to tune in there and see us on LA Football Network every day, I should say, all year long, every day. Thank you, Jamal, as always. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll talk to you all here in a couple days.